Wednesday wondered how she got herself into this predicament once again for the second time in 6 months. First Tyler and Thornhill and now this. She had been stabbed once and she wasn't in a hurry to repeat the experience, it not being as fun as she once thought it. There would be no Goody to save her this time. No Enid either. Enid. Wednesday nearly closed her eyes in regret. What happened with Enid was regrettable, no. It was horrific and tragic, and Wednesday would bear the brunt of that guilt until the day she died. Which could possibly be today. The night had been thunderous, the spring having arrived started storm season, and that night had been particularly bad. Wednesday had arrived back at the dorm, choosing to ignore that Enid was watching her closely with a reserved nervousness. Who could blame her? They had been fencing together and practicing sparring throughout the semester. Which after a particularly heated session ended with both girls on the floor. With Wednesday above her and a blushing, amused Enid underneath, Wednesday could do the only thing that her blood sang out at her to do. And so Wednesday had kissed her. And she had rushed out of the room, after realizing what she had just done. Leaving Enid both confused and somewhat hurt. Wednesday had sat down at her typewriter, but she could still feel eyes boring into her back. Wednesday sighed and looked back at her roommate. Out with it, Sinclair, it's my writing hour and I can feel your eyes blazing into my back. Wednesday huffed, her eyes never leaving those of the Leakin. Enid nervously stepped forward. And Wednesday fixed her with a stare, showing that she had her attention. Hi, Wens. Enid said softly. Wednesday's traitorous heart raced at how soft Enid's voice sounded. But her mind wanted to shut that down. The Addams family curse ruled her heart now with an iron fist, demanding that she take Enid in a fit of passion and make love to her, to show her that she is worthy to be an Addams. Loving her would be the scariest thing she would ever do, the scariest thing she has ever done, scared her because it made her vulnerable. Made her weak. Light always sought out the darkness and the darkness would always succumb to the light. But not this time. Wednesday would not defile the purest fucking being on this earth with her all-consuming black hole of a soul. She wouldn't let it. What I'm trying to, Wednesday huffed, out with it Enid, I don't have all night, she said folding her arms. Enid nodded and regained what little composure she had. I like you, Wednesday. Enid uttered, and it sent Wednesday's world crashing down into the abyss. Wednesday held her composure, but her heart was thumping so fast, its roar of victory. The family curse lighting her blood on fire. But Enid didn't stop there. After everything, after Tyler and the hide, I finally figured out why I wolfed out that night. Enid said, her eyes never leaving Wednesday's, who wished for nothing but for her to turn her piercing gaze away. It was for you, Wens. Remember when I said I had been to the best lichenologists in the country? Well, they told me that sometimes late bloomers only bloom when they find the one. Wednesday frowned. The one what, Enid? Wednesday asked with bated breath. The one. Enid said like it was obvious, but she sighed and shifted her eyes downwards. They said when I find my mate. From the moment we met part of me knew it was you, Wens, and when I realized you were in danger I went to find you. I didn't care what happened to me, Enid faltered as emotion bubbled up in her throat. All I knew was that my mate needed me, Enid uttered quietly. You are my mate, Willa, and there it was. Wednesday swallowed hard. The only sound was the thunderous lightning, the flash of which lit them both up in a white glow. Her heart roared at her to take their betrothed, their future bride, their future everything, to let them mark her as mate. And to mark her proudly as an Addams. Enid took a step forward. Say something, please. Enid begged, her eyes searching hers for a hint of something, anything. You are mistaken. Wednesday found herself saying. Her tone was cold. I'm sorry. Enid blurted out, not believing her ears. You are mistaken, Wednesday forcibly enunciating the words, standing up and stalked up towards her roommate. Her heart screamed in betrayal, a pain settled in her chest from the rejection of what was destined. Good. She thought. Fuck destiny. Wens. Enid started but Wednesday silenced her with a wave of her hand. You wolfed out because it was a blood moon. It forces all werewolves that have never transformed to do so. Enid's reaction would haunt her forever, like she could see the point where her heart shattered. Nothing more, nothing less. I saved you, I nearly died doing it, Enid said, her lip trembling. A fact that I am forever grateful for. Wednesday said. But what you feel is nothing more than a delusion, a fabrication. Wednesday couldn't stop herself from raining blow after blow. Your desperation to find a mate has led you here. Ajax was obviously not it. Who will you think it is next time, Yoko, Bianca? Wednesday laughed hollowly. Your desperation to be loved has left you needy and pathetic. The sound of the slap reverberated around their room. The sting of it was paled in comparison to how Wednesday felt. Conflicted. But Wednesday raised a hand to her cheek regardless, pressing a hand to her face, shocked that Enid had actually slapped her. Enid's face was full of regret a mere second afterwards. Willa. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Wednesday glared at her before spinning on her heel. We're done here. Enid stepped forward, dangerously pushing the already wafer-thin boundary. I love you, Wednesday. Enid blurted out sadly. I love you. Wednesday halted mid-step. I don't. Wednesday's words may as well have been bullets from a gun. You don't mean that. Enid's voice trembled. You kissed me. Wednesday sighed, betraying a hint of her true feelings, a fact I now regret. It meant nothing. Don't tell me that doesn't mean nothing. Enid said tearfully but angrily. Don't tell me that. Not you, she finished sadly. It meant the fucking world to me. Move on, Enid, Wednesday said, sitting back down by her typewriter. She fiddled with it, adjusting the paper before beginning to type. The words she put down on the page were hollow, much like herself. She hated herself. How can she love another if all she can do is hate? Including herself. Wednesday didn't have the heart to tell her kissing her was like kissing the surface of a star. Wednesday closed her eyes as the sound of Enid's heartbroken sobs reached her, but Wednesday could see Enid in the reflection from part of her typewriter. Enid had collapsed to the ground and was sobbing into her hands. Stricken with grief. What Wednesday didn't know that the heartbreak that came from a mate rejecting a werewolf could kill them with it, werewolves being so much more intrinsically codependent on the love of their mate. Wednesday may as well have handed her a death sentence. But if it didn't kill them, it could mentally destroy them, turning them rabid or feral. Slowly Enid rose to her feet. And almost like she was in a trance she wandered over to the door, her face stricken with tear streaks, and smeared mascara. Her hand shook as she reached for the handle before swiftly pulling the door open. Enid stopped and glanced back at Wednesday, who continued to type, apparently paying no attention to her. I'll love you forever. Enid said softly. Before she let the door slam behind her. The slam made Wednesday wince. That was the last night anyone saw Enid alive. And then Ghostface appeared a mere 2 days later. 2 days later. Tyler had managed to escape captivity, lost nearly 15 kilograms in weight and acquired a small burner phone and was shacking up in an abandoned house. It was easy to convince Xavier to give him Wednesday's number. And use him to take pictures, which he then sent to him and used against her. Of course Xavier didn't know it was Tyler that he was talking to, only that he promised that if he did what he said, he could end up being with Wednesday. And Xavier being obsessed with her gave in easily. Tyler was shaken out of his train of thought as the phone began to ring. He frowned. He told Thorpe never to contact him through calls, only through texting, so he let it ring. Until it stopped, showing a missed call from an unknown number. He huffed until he felt the phone vibrate. It was a text. Answer the phone, or your father, the sheriff, will be spewed all over the lawn in bits and pieces. Tyler gasped as he read the text, and not a second later the phone began to ring again. He answered it angrily. Listen here, Thorpe, who the fuck do you think you are threatening? He trailed off as he heard the laughter on the other end. That was decidedly not Xavier. Hello Tyler, that's no way to greet someone, is it? The voice asked. Tyler gulped. The voice was deep, male, and definitely not the Nevermore student. So who are you then? A ghost from your past, the voice said. I'm hanging up now. He went to press end call, but the voice on the other end stopped him in his tracks. Hang up on me now and I'll fucking kill your father right now, do you understand? Tyler scoffed. And why should I believe you? There was a pause before his phone vibrated again. The voice was smug. Check your messages. Tyler opened the text with a file attachment. His blood went cold as he saw his father. Tied to a chair, his face had several cuts on it and he was unconscious. Do I have your attention now, Tyler? The voice said, smug and taunting. He raised the phone to his ear again. Yeah, he stuttered. Good. Now then tell me, What are you doing here back in Jericho? And trust me, a wrong answer will result in your father's guts being on the floor, to get revenge on Wednesday Addams, Tyler said. Correct. Very good, maybe your father won't die tonight. The voice said. Only there is one problem with that, the voice said. And that would be what? Tyler didn't notice the shadows that parted, and only did he at the last second notice anything amiss, his heightened senses dangerously out of sync. But it was enough. The shape of blackness burst out of the darkness, the steel hunting knife glittered before it was being thrust straight into his heart. The phone dropped to the floor and his widened in pain, taking in the sight before him. The being was dressed in all black, except for the white mask, with contorted eyes and mouth in an endless horrified scream. Ghostface leaned in further until the mask was right in Tyler's face, pushing the knife further and harder. The problem is that she is mine, only now the voice was now soft, feminine and angry. He couldn't place where he heard it for a moment. The mask hiding their identity. I should have fucking killed you when I had the chance, the girl said, as she began to twist the knife. And suddenly Tyler recognized where he had heard it before. You, he managed to accuse as blood filled his mouth, escaping down his chin. Yes, me, Ghostface replied, the other hand came up grasping a box, white and silver in color before she held it up to her mouth. What's wrong, Tyler? Looks like you've seen a ghost. The voice said, now back to the deep, male voice he had heard before. A voice changer, synthesizer, vocoder. Tyler realized. And with his last breath he asked, H.O.did, Y.O.U.fin, find.me? Ghostface leaned in. Because I can smell your foul fucking stench anywhere, and then she ripped the knife out of his chest, before she began to repeatedly stab the same spot over and over again, until Tyler ragdolled and became limp. His body falling to the floor. Ghostface looked at her handiwork. Raising the knife, she held it laterally across her chest and she brought her other hand up to wipe along its length, cleaning it. 1 down, 3 to go. Ghostface muttered, before she grabbed onto his leg and began to drag him from the house. The next morning a neighbor found Tyler hanging dead from a tree. His own entrails being used to string him up. Sheriff Galpin had found himself untied and relatively unharmed after being knocked out the night before, only needing a few stitches, but once he turned up to the crime scene, he cried, seeing his son strung up on the tree. He moved closer to only see 3 words carved into his flesh. She is mine. And Galpin had an inkling as to who she was. Wherever death and mayhem happened, you would be sure to find an Addams at the center of it all. Wednesday sat with her arms folded as she glowered up at Sheriff Galpin. I already told you, I have not spoken to Tyler since he tried to kill me, Sheriff, nor would I want to, really. So why did I find him strung by his innards this morning, Addams? Galpin growled. Truly, I do not know, Wednesday said truthfully. The only thing I care about right now is where Enid is, Enid? He questioned. Her roommate, Weems supplied helpfully. Not just my roommate, she is so much more than that. Wednesday thought to herself. After that night Enid had not returned, it was day 3 and no one had seen or heard from her since. Wednesday had gone over to Yoko and even the vampire said she hadn't seen her. The regret and the hatred she felt for herself had grown tenfold and now all she wanted to do was find her roommate and bring her home. She promised whatever god or gods that may exist that she would offer anything in return if her roommate was returned to her, and so that she could make things right and offer the girl she had scorned her beating heart in return for forgiveness and the love she now knew she desperately desired. But Enid was gone. Wednesday had skipped classes for the last 2 days after reporting that Enid had gone missing, searching the woods for any sign for the girl, for any sign of her Enid. And there was nothing. Maybe Tyler had something to with Enid going missing, Wednesday wondered out loud. What did you just say, Addams? Galpin hissed. It's logical to assume that he would want revenge against her for how badly she injured him during their fight last semester, or have you so readily forgotten, Sheriff? Wednesday said. You insolent, little. Sheriff Galpin. I will remind you that Wednesday is a minor and there is no evidence to the contrary. This is a witch hunt and I won't tolerate it in my school, Weems exclaimed. Wednesday had never been more happy to have the woman on side. Galpin huffed and turned away. Look, Sheriff, I can't imagine how hard this must be for you, but Wednesday's argument makes sense, as much as hard it would be to consider for you, Weems said. Galpin turned to look at Weems, he visibly swallowed. It does. He conceded. He placed his hat back on his head, ambled over to the door before turning to regard Wednesday. We'll re-examine the crime scene and see if we can pick up Enid's trail. Thank you, I appreciate it, Sheriff Galpin nodded before he walked out of the office. He seems calm despite finding his son dead, Wednesday noted. Weems sighed. You didn't have anything to do with that, did you? Weems had to ask. Wednesday turned to regard Weems with a full stare. I already said no, as much as I would have liked to deal the killing blow. I regret to admit it was not me. Weems let out the breath she was holding. Despite their troubled past in trusting each other, Weems did believe her. Okay then, good, Weems said. And in regards to the sheriff, I think he was prepared for a while for something like this. After everything, Wednesday nodded in thought. At least Tyler had been dealt with now and would no longer be a concern, but she couldn't help but feel that Tyler's reappearance and Enid's disappearance weren't in some way connected. It seemed too coincidental to be one. As she left the office, however, she didn't know just how right she was. Wednesday sat on her bed, hands in her lap as she looked mournfully at Enid's untouched and unmade bed. Thing stood on her bedside table and watched as Wednesday lost herself in thought until she startled him with her words. If only. Wednesday began. Thing watched on in concern. Wednesday very rarely faltered with her words. If only I had told her something different, Wednesday finished lamely. Thing carefully tapped out his message as Wednesday turned to look at him. You love her, don't you? With my entire being, Thing, with everything that I am. Wednesday said. The curse? He tapped out. The curse, Wednesday confirmed. I hurt her, Thing, I hurt her so badly. Wednesday uttered. Thing simply watched as Wednesday went through this, unable to comfort her, knowing the only thing that possibly could was missing. Wednesday looked down at her boots, ashamed of who she was. I hate myself, Thing, Wednesday said. Thing turned slowly. It's my fault she left the dorm that night. Wednesday said, if I hadn't. If I didn't. Wednesday sighed. I love her and I broke her heart. Wednesday said, her heart racing at the implications. I would have thrown myself off the balcony by now, but I don't even know if she's. Wednesday couldn't bear to think about it. But if she is, I will make them suffer, I will make them beg for death. Wednesday declared. And a silent vow that if she was dead she would throw herself off that balcony to reunite with her love in the afterlife. She was brought out of ire as the cell phone that Xavier had gifted her began to ring and vibrate on the bedside table. It could be Enid? Thing tapped out excitedly. That was the only thing that could have made her pick up the phone in that instant. She lifted it to her ear. Hello, Enid? Wednesday instantly asked. There was a moment of silence. Hello, Wednesday, the voice said, deep and male. Definitely not Enid. Wednesday felt her spine stiffen. The way his voice sounded was almost like a taunt. She had a feeling whoever this was connected to whatever was going on. Where is Enid? Wednesday demanded instantly. Oh, I wouldn't worry about Enid right about now. In fact, I would be worried about yourself, the voice growled. And why is that? Wednesday asked. Because you'll never see me coming. The voice said lowly. Wednesday's eyes snapped forward on instinct. The phone fell as she reached for the knife that was in her sheath, as a figure in black burst through the door that led to the balcony. Their white mask a stark contrast to the rest of the outfit. Wednesday caught a glimpse of black boots that added an inch to their height. Wednesday barely brought her blade up as Ghostface took a swipe with their own. Both blades clattered away from the other. Wednesday struck out with her boot, shoving the unbalanced Ghostface backwards. A muffled high-pitched grunt emanated from the masked killer. Did you kill Tyler? Ghostface whipped round to look at Wednesday directly. Wednesday watched as Ghostface pressed into the side of their neck. A green light lit up underneath. And the voice was suddenly deeper, not as it had been a moment before, not as high-pitched. But the same one that had spoken on the phone. You should have seen it. Poor boy looked like he had seen a ghost, the voice gleefully proclaimed. Why? Why? Because it was fun, because it was easy, because he was going after you. Wednesday narrowed her eyes. And why would you care about that? Because you are mine. Ghostface roared, lunging forwards. Thing leapt off the bedside table and latched onto Ghostface's mask. They roared in anger, bringing up their gloved left hand to rip Thing off. Wednesday shifted to the left as Thing was hurled towards her. The appendage went flying past her. Wednesday moved forwards. You do not scare me, your technique is sloppy, your form is corrupted by rage, Wednesday said as Ghostface thrust forwards. Wednesday caught their arm and spun, tossing Ghostface straight into the wardrobe, breaking the wood apart. Ghostface scrambled to their feet and reached towards their belt, taking out a second knife, and circling around until their back was towards the balcony. Do you always hurt the ones you love, Wednesday? Only to the ones that deserve it, Ghostface cackled. And did Enid deserve it? Did she? Wednesday froze. What about Enid? Wednesday said, her face shifting in anger. She died alone, wishing that someone loved her. Lies, Wednesday said through gritted teeth, her hand clenched the handle of her own knife, so tight it nearly drew blood. Really? Do you know what she begged me before I killed her? Ghostface taunted. Wednesday didn't respond. Don't harm Wednesday, I'll do anything, just not her. Ghostface laughed sickeningly. It was the final straw, and uncharacteristically Wednesday roared in both rage and sorrow and surged forwards, and Ghostface was taken by surprise. Unable to react as Wednesday raised her left fist and let loose with every ounce of power she could muster. Her fist collided with the right eye, which sent Ghostface's body tumbling backwards towards the window by several feet. Yoko and Divina, having heard the commotion, burst into the room. Wednesday spun her head round. Get Weems, now, Wednesday said frantically. Yoko left no room for argument, quickly retreating down the staircase. Wednesday turned back around after a mere moment, and her brow creased in confusion. Ghostface was gone. She hastened to the spot where they had fallen, in complete and utter disbelief. Her head shot up as the door to the balcony swung on its hinges in the wind. Wednesday wanted to scream in frustration. Her phone vibrated with an incoming text message and she moved like lightning to retrieve the device, the screen somehow intact after the fall. She opened it to find a single sentence. You always hurt the ones you say you love. And Wednesday tried to swallow the anger that bubbled in her throat. Because there, at the end of the sentence, was a wolf emoji. It was too much. Wednesday collapsed to her knees as she cried, arms hanging limply at her side, the phone having clattered to the floor once again. Hot angry tears ran their course down her cheeks. She did not bother to restrain her sorrow because Enid Sinclair was worth every tear, worth every wail that Wednesday let out, the reality and truth finally sinking in. Enid Sinclair, the only person she would ever love, was dead. And now there was only one thing left to do. She would beat Ghostface to death with her bare hands, before willingly dying to join her wolf in the place where wolves run for eternity. Weems, Yoko, and Divina burst into the room, only to see Wednesday Addams, upon the floor, roaring with sorrow, and with vengeance seething in her bones. Wednesday glared at everyone that passed her at breakfast the next morning. Her eyes were red and bloodshot, not having gained a wink of sleep. Not that she would want to. Yoko, being a vampire, had stayed, like a shadow in Wednesday's room that night, in case Ghostface returned. But a pattern was beginning to show itself. Before an attack, Ghostface would call to unnerve and taunt the person they were about to attack. Galpin had come by that morning to tell Weems, who related to Wednesday, that Enid's body hadn't been found, and 20 square miles of wilderness had been searched. To no avail. So who worse to darken on her metaphorical doorstep that morning other than Xavier Thorpe? Hey, Wednesday, he said with a characteristic smug smirk. Wednesday merely spared him a look of utter contempt before she began people watching again in her bid to find Enid's killer. Yoko and Divina spotted him from a mile off. Both of them shared a look before they started to bolt towards the pair, Xavier not understanding the danger he was in. He reached out a hand to touch hers, lightly brushing her fingers before she pulled them away, like she had been burnt. Xavier sighed quietly before continuing. Hey, do you know the summer dance in a few weeks? Well, I was wondering if you wanted dash, thwack. In a flash of steel and silver, Wednesday's dagger found itself embedded in the table, right in between his middle and index finger. The look that Wednesday was giving him chilled him to his sheer core. Yoko and Divina too late to do anything as they pushed through the milling students. I am mourning the love of my miserable life, and you think this would be a good time to ask me to a dance, a fucking dance? Wednesday roared. You repulse me, you disgust me. Do you really think you could ever compare to her? I just thought. Xavier began stumbling over his words. Wednesday saw red. I'll fucking kill you. She pulled the knife out from the table just as his eyes widened. The look in her eyes was crazy, deranged and lacking humanity. She rose the knife above her head, but before she could swing the knife down, Yoko and Divina desperately wrapped their arms round Wednesday's as she let out a furious roar. Wednesday, stop, Yoko gasped out. The shorter girl's strength was surprising and dangerously so. Wednesday, this isn't what Enid would want, Yoko said quietly, but the words seemed to register in her head. Her breathing began to slow down. Yoko began to shush her, before gently coaxing the blade out of Wednesday's hand. Yoko spun to look at Xavier. Go, you moron, she said harshly. In the wisest move of the day, Xavier nodded his head and scrambled away as Wednesday gave one last attempt to pull away from the two girls holding her back. Unbeknownst to any of them, a ghost witnessed everything that had happened. Xavier retreated to his own dorm. He slammed the door shut and ran tired hands over his face, his life having flashed between his eyes. He sighed before collapsing on the bed. Wednesday was meant to be his. He was the one that saved her first. He was the one that knew her from so long ago, and yet all she could about was her missing roommate. He went to grab his cell phone, but as his hand neared it, it began to ring. He frowned, seeing the called ID was unknown. He cautiously picked it up and answered. Hello? There was a moment of silence. Hello, Xavier. Did anyone ever teach you to not touch what doesn't belong to you? The voice practically shouted. Xavier frowned. And just what did I touch that didn't belong to me? Xavier asked, his pulse beginning to race. You touched my Wednesday. Xavier nearly suffered a heart attack as the window in his room shattered. Leaping from the bed in a blind panic, so blind in fact that he didn't notice the closet behind him opening slowly nor the creaking of the hinges, Ghostface slipped out of the closet. Eyes completely focused on Xavier, it was too simple to rig up a mechanism to break the window, too easy in face, Ghostface mused as they stalked up behind Xavier. The knife struck the back of Xavier's thighs, causing the boy to drop to his knees. Having lost all strength, he cried out as Ghostface stalked round to face him directly. Even though he couldn't see it, he could feel the hatred that was being glared at him from behind the mask. Don't kill me, please. Xavier began to beg. He tried to crawl away until his back hit the wall. Ghostface moved forward slowly, methodically. You're lucky I need you for something else, Xavier, Ghostface said with a growl. And don't think that doesn't piss me off, Ghostface added as an afterthought. What? What do you need me for? He gasped out in pain. Do you know what they did to thieves and would-be thieves back in old times? Ghostface taunted. Xavier shook his head, terrified. They cut their hands off. Ghostface proclaimed gleefully. And do you know why they did that? Xavier was beyond terrified. A small pool of liquid had began to grow beneath him, the foul stench hitting Ghostface's sensitive nose. Whilst repugnant, Ghostface was nonetheless pleased. He shook his head. Ghostface reached into their cloak and retrieved something. Xavier paled looking at it. It was a hacksaw. It's about sending a message. You touched her and I need to teach others to not touch what doesn't belong to them. Ghostface began to yell, every word louder than the last. Xavier wasn't exactly an idiot and he began to piece together everything: Enid's disappearance, Wednesday's kill rage, Tyler's murder. Oh my God, you're... Xavier stuttered out in shock. Tell anyone and I will gut you and I will gut your family. Remember your little sister Xavier? She'll look nice with her insides on the out. Xavier frantically nodded his head in compliance. Good to see you have some integrity. Now hold still. Ghostface said as they grabbed his left wrist first and raised the hacksaw. No one heard the screams as his hands were torn clean off. Everyone was still preoccupied with breakfast. Wednesday stood in the infirmary, Xavier having been the victim of the second attack. Both his hands had been hacked off and now was going through emergency surgery to reattach his hands. Wednesday having been thoroughly questioned after the little incident at breakfast, there were about 20 eyewitnesses that could attest to the fact that Wednesday was still in the cafeteria at the time of his mutilation. Weems stood with her arms folded. If this keeps happening we may have to send the students home, Weems said. Especially with everything that happened last semester, Weems said with sigh. I'm not leaving, Wednesday said immediately. Weems smiled sadly. I know all too well how the Adams curse works. You won't stop until Enid is avenged, will you? Never, Wednesday said, tilting her head up in pride. Your father was just the same, Weems remembered fondly. He would have killed and be killed for Tish. There was something in her tone that indicated a painful past. Wednesday felt a small measure of sympathy. To be rejected was a pain that was almost unbearable, but for a werewolf or an Addams? Torture would not do the utter pain of it any justice. Wednesday mused just how that would work if a werewolf's blood mixed with that of an Addams, how the curse would work in tandem with a wolf's mating dynamics. Truly it would be a pain the world will have never seen. "I'm sorry," Wednesday found herself saying. Weems gave Wednesday a look. "It's okay, I had a lot of years to come to terms with it," Weems said, waving her hand dismissively. "The curse has taken me, just like it did my father, and his father before him, and every Addams since the day we were cursed," Wednesday said. "I'm so sorry, Wednesday, I know what that means, especially now, don't apologize, to love Enid." Wednesday began before faltering as a wave of sorrow made her lightheaded. "To love her was the single greatest act of my life, until I avenge her, and that will be, until the day when the moon rises to its fullest height, will I take my own life in order to be with her once more. Your mother and father would be proud," Weems said. "I know, to die for one's love, whether in sacrifice, heartbreak, or to follow them into death itself, was the greatest and most honorable act of love an Addams could perform." Wednesday had already come to terms with that. She would avenge her and leave the world willingly, or she would die by the hand that killed her. In either case, she would reunite with her. Wednesday moved to leave the infirmary, before looking back at Weems. "For what it's worth, Principal Weems, you were the best you could have been for this school and for me," Wednesday said before she stepped out of the door and walked away, leaving Weems to grieve the soon-to-be-lost Wednesday Addams. Wednesday walked down the corridor and into the quad, before moving towards the fountain. To their table. Two Fangs looked up abruptly as the raging inferno that was Wednesday approached them. "Move, now," she growled out, hand twitching towards the sheath that held her dagger. The two Fangs didn't need to be told twice before moving away, leaving Wednesday to sit in the usual spot she would take before glancing at the seat where Enid would sit every lunchtime. Every lunchtime, where Wednesday would read a book, her hand resting on the bench next to Enid's. Enid would slowly inch her fingers towards Wednesday's. She would link their fingers together and then play and fiddle with them. Delicate touches that would send the most delightful of shivers up her spine. Enid would give her the same sunshine smile every time. Wednesday would try and concentrate on her book, but she simply couldn't. And Wednesday remembered with a massive lurch of her heart when Enid wouldn't be satisfied with simple touches. She would tug her hand into her lap. Her hand would keep her fingers interlocked with each other before tracing small circles on the top of her hand with a finger. Wednesday sighed as the cell phone began to ring once more. Already knowing who it was, she answered. "What?" Wednesday asked, casting her eyes around. "Hello, Wednesday, I want to play a game," Ghostface taunted. "Is that game how you're going to fucking die? Because believe me, I have already thought of 1,000 ways to do so, and when I catch you, I'm going to rip you to fucking pieces." Ghostface merely chuckled in amusement. "Big words for such a small girl," Ghostface taunted. "Does the cloak and dagger routine not bore you? You are nothing but a coward," Wednesday declared. "And yet here we are, talking like true psychopaths. Does it not send a tingle down your spine?" "Believe me, I am no coward." "Then show yourself," Wednesday said, withdrawing her knife. The students that were milling around the quad quickly began to leave, seeing Wednesday Addams brandish a knife. As one psychopath to another, "Let us end this charade," she added. Ghostface chuckled with amusement. "Not yet, I still have one thing I have left to do. I'll be seeing you soon, Wednesday." There was a click and the phone flashed up with "call ended," and Wednesday lowered it in frustration. "Damn it," she gritted out. She lowered the phone before looking at Enid's spot. The quad was uncomfortably quiet. She would never feel Enid hold her hand ever again. And a traitorous sob was ripped from her throat before she managed to calm herself down, letting the mask of contempt settle on her face once more. She turned to regard that spot once more. "I will love you, Enid, for the rest of time and into the next. I just wish I could have told you that," Wednesday said before she turned and strode from the quad. Wednesday watched as the ambulance pulled up and paramedics rushed with a stretcher towards the school. Ghostface had struck again. Wednesday watched as a student was carted out. It was Ingrid. A girl that used to bully Enid relentlessly for not being able to wolf out first Tyler, then Xavier, and now Ingrid. Wednesday stalked closer to see the multiple stab wounds and the blood that had soaked her clothes. "What happened?" Wednesday almost growled out. Ingrid focused long enough to look at Wednesday. "They told me that," reve, revenge, the girl managed to stutter out. For what? Wednesday asked. The girl began to hyperventilate. They didn't say. Wednesday frowned. The only person she knew of that would want revenge against her was Enid. But Enid was gone. Was Ghostface avenging her against everyone that ever did her wrong? That would explain why Wednesday herself had been attacked, but something still didn't add up. Xavier said after his surgery that Ghostface cut them off because he touched what belonged to them. Even Ghostface had proclaimed that Wednesday was theirs. Wednesday felt like she was missing a very important piece of the puzzle. She wandered away from the ambulance as it drove away. The phone rang again. Wednesday answered it. Whatever patience she had left was gone. Why are you doing this? Wednesday couldn't help but ask. You want to know why I did it, Wednesday? Because you tossed me out into the cold, just like they did, just like everyone ever has, so I thought I would have a little fun. And get stabby. After all, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, wouldn't you say? I have never killed or hurt anyone that didn't deserve it, Wednesday said, entering the corridors surrounding the quad, and I didn't? See, there are things you don't know, Wednesday, for example, like how Tyler was planning to get revenge on you. I killed him for you. I killed him because you were not his to get revenge on. And Xavier? What was his crime? Wednesday asked, although she didn't care much, if at all, for him. She was nevertheless curious. He was working with Tyler, thinking that he would obtain your affections, and he touched you. That was something I could not abide, so I sliced off his hands. Ghostface said gleefully. Why are you obsessed with me? Wednesday asked with a huff. Why wouldn't I be? That's not an answer. Wednesday growled. Tough, that's the only one you're gonna get. Wednesday started to climb the spiral staircase that led to Ophelia Hall. Well, answer me this then. What did you do with Enid? Enid? She is taken care of, not like you cared about her anyway. Poor little Enid, left to wallow in the dark and the rain where no one wanted her, and in that darkness she found a ghost. Wednesday swallowed the bile and guilt that threatened to retching up her throat. You broke her heart and left her to the mercy of something like me. Ghostface's laugh was high and cruel. I never. If I could take back that night I would give my very life. Wednesday said. Why? Ghostface asked. You never cared about her. I have been watching you a long time, Wednesday. You led her into the Gates house, nearly got her killed. Ghostface mocked. I never meant to. I never meant to hurt her, Wednesday said. Her voice trembling, but you did. You did. And poor little Enid died alone wishing that someone had loved her. Ghostface says angrily. I did. I did love her, with everything. Wednesday's eyes darken. You know nothing, she spat. Ghostface chuckles, and you do? Fine, let's play a game, shall we? Enid trivia. Why? Wednesday asks, her eyes red. Because she's still alive. Wednesday feels her heart stop. And she stops in her tracks as her heart began to race impossibly fast. But get a question wrong and she dies. You fail to answer and she dies. Ghostface threatens. If you love her so much, then this should be an easy category for you. Wednesday swallows nervously. Who is Enid's favorite K-pop band? 17. Wednesday answers instantly, yes. Very good. Next question, same category. Ghostface pauses briefly. What item did Enid come back to get when she roomed with Yoko? Wednesday thinks for a moment. Silver Moon nail polish. Well done, perhaps Enid may get to live yet. Final question. Ghostface taunted. Wednesday listened to the silence that followed with bated breath. As she made her way to the room to her and Enid's dorm. Who was Enid Sinclair in love with? The person she considered her mate. The one above all. The one she would kill for. Wednesday reached for the door handle and opened the door. Me. Wednesday whispered. Yes, you. The voice said, and she was startled as she looked up to see Ghostface stood in the center of their room, their body eclipsing the spiderweb window. Wednesday tossed the phone to the side, no longer needing it, and went for the knife in her sheath. Withdrawing it, Ghostface made no move to stop her. I answered all your questions correctly, Wednesday said, stepping forward. Take me to her. Now. Wednesday growled, with a piercing glare. Why? Ghostface said. Why what? Wednesday almost screamed. Ghostface raised a shaking hand to side of their neck. where the vocoder sat. Pressing the button that she knew sat there, the light disappeared. "Why couldn't you love me when I needed you to?" The voice was hoarse and feminine and desperate. Wednesday's eyes widened. She let the knife slip from her fingers, the blade making a loud clatter as it hit the floor. Wednesday strode forwards, closing the distance between them. "Stay back," the voice said, raising the knife they still held. "No, not this time." Wednesday, her voice softer than it had been in days. She was now in stabbing distance, but Ghostface made no move to attack. Instead, their bodies started to shake as the knife lowered. Wednesday reached over with her left hand and gently coaxed it out of her fingers. She could hear the faint sounds of sobbing underneath the mask. She tossed the knife away from them, landing close to her own. Wednesday reached up with both hands and slowly took hold of the Ghostface mask and pulled, gently. Bright blue eyes greeted her, although the one on the right side was purple and black with a bruise, although the eyes still shone beautifully. "Enid." Wednesday breathed out in relief. Enid only sobbed harder and louder. "I'm so sorry, Willa." Enid cried out. Wednesday brought the wolf's face level with her own and pressed a kiss to her forehead, causing Enid to let out a whimper. "It should be me who should be sorry, me soul," Wednesday said with regret. "I should never had said what I did." "So why did you?" Enid asked desperately, gloved hands desperately clutching onto Wednesday. "Because I didn't believe I was worthy of you," Wednesday uttered, tears forming in her own eyes. "You're my mate, Wens," Enid said, simply giving her a tearful and hopeful smile. Wednesday raised a hand and brushed her finger delicately over the bruises under Enid's right eye. "Was this me?" she asked. Enid merely nodded. Wednesday tilted Enid's head forwards and pressed a small kiss to the bruise before pressing more, smaller kisses to them, making Enid giggle tearfully. "I'm sorry for trying to hurt you," Enid said softly. "There is no better way to court an Adams than attempted murder, Enid," Wednesday said, taking Enid by the hand and leading them to her bed. Enid let out a watery chuckle. "Of course you would see it like that. I thought I would never see you again, Enid," Wednesday said, letting the tears finally fall. "I was ready to die to be with you again." Enid looked at her, her eyes hopeful. "Does that mean?" "Enid Sinclair," Wednesday began, but words failed her, her breath hitched. She took a breath and continued, "You have left a mark upon my soul that will be there forever. I will never stop loving you. I will be yours until the end of this universe and the beginning of the next. I don't want all the answers because the only one I will ever need is you, Enid Sinclair." "Wednesday," Enid uttered, her eyes were practically hearts as she stared in utter reverence. "One day I will give you everything you ever wanted. We will have a family. I will make you an Adams. I will worship you for merely breathing, and gaze in wonder at how one person can be so bright and so beautiful," Wednesday said, bringing up a hand to gently trace her fingers over Enid's face. "You, Enid Sinclair, it could only ever be you," Wednesday said, turning to face Enid properly. "I love you," Wednesday said softly. Enid surged forwards, clambering into Wednesday's lap, wrapping her legs round Wednesday's waist as she planted a searing, desperate kiss upon her lips. Wednesday cupped the back of her head, keeping her there as they both began to run out of breath. Their lips smacked lightly as they pulled away. "Make love to me," Wednesday said, her eyes half-lidded. The curse in her veins roared proudly at the declaration. Enid gasped, "Wednesday." Enid hit her on the arm lightly. Wednesday didn't care and captured her lips again. Enid, all too happy to be with her mate, responded just as eagerly. They pulled apart, knowing they would have to go down and let Weems know that Enid was alive. Enid pulled off the Ghostface costume, placing it under the floorboards. Before going downstairs hand in hand, Enid then gave a fantastical tale of how she was kidnapped and held captive for several days until she could break free, and how she nearly killed Ghostface with her claws, saying that he fled after she scratched him across the face. Enid had even used the time to use an abandoned hut in the middle of the woods, and the police investigated. Before pursuing the imaginary trail that she set them on, Wednesday watched her with complete adoration at just how well and how thought out her lies actually were. The attacks on students stopped and Xavier returned to the school near the end of the semester. He met the gaze of Enid fearfully, who gave him a sinister smirk and wave, her other hand possessively clutching Wednesday's other arm. And the Ghostface costume? It stayed under the floorboards until one night, until Enid and Wednesday got the bright idea to roleplay with it. More often than not, with Enid resuming her old mantle, naked underneath, before they would submit to their passions. Eventually Enid Sinclair became Enid Adams. The two became 5 as Wednesday and Enid adopted 3 werewolf cubs that had been abandoned by their parents for being the runt of the litter. And yet they became more than worthy to bear the Adams name. Wednesday and Enid would then live in peace for the rest of their lives.